The harbor wakes long before the sun. You arrive while the streets are still wrapped in darkness, carrying everything you own in a small sea chest and a tightly rolled blanket. The morning air is cold, damp, and heavy with the smell of salt, tar, and fresh cut timber. Ahead of you, hundreds of masts stand against the pale sky like a forest without leaves. Some ships are bound for nearby ports. Others will cross entire oceans. Yours belongs to the second kind. She is a whaling ship. Within a few hours, she will leave the safety of land and may not return for 2 or even 3 years. You pause for a moment before walking down the weathered wooden pier. The harbor is already alive. Coopers roll heavy barrels toward waiting wagons. Blacksmiths give iron fittings one final inspection. Sailmakers fold enormous canvas sails that will soon catch the Atlantic winds. Nearby, fishermen quietly prepare their own boats, hardly paying attention to the larger vessel beside them. For them, this is another ordinary morning. For you, it is the beginning of a life unlike anything you have ever known. The ship towers above the dock. Her dark wooden hull bears countless scratches left by years of storms and distant voyages. The thick ropes creak softly against the tide. Every few moments, the hull lets out a deep wooden groan, as though the vessel were already impatient to return to the sea. Crew members move quickly across the deck. Some secure cargo beneath heavy canvas. Others coil ropes with practiced hands. No one wastes movement. Most of these sailors have done this many times before. Many have crossed oceans you have only heard about in stories. A few glance in your direction before returning to their work. Nobody asks whether you are ready. On a whaling voyage, readiness is not a question. The sea decides that later. You step aboard. The deck shifts gently beneath your boots. It is only a small movement now, almost comforting. Before long, you will learn that this gentle rocking never truly stops. Not during breakfast, not during work, not even while you sleep. Below deck, the air immediately changes. The scent of fresh sea air disappears, replaced by oak, damp rope, lamp oil, and hundreds of stored supplies packed tightly into every available space. Barrels of salted meat line one wall. Nearby stand casks filled with fresh water. Flour, dried beans, hardtack, spare sails, tools, lanterns, medicines, and countless coils of rope fill nearly every corner. Everything needed to survive years away from civilization must already be here. Once the shoreline disappears behind the horizon, there will be no convenient market, no fresh deliveries, no quick return home. Every forgotten tool could become tomorrow's problem. The captain finally appears. He speaks calmly. His words are few. There is no dramatic speech, only quiet instructions. The tide is turning. It is time. Above, sailors begin climbing into the rigging with surprising speed. The first sails slowly unfold. Heavy canvas catches the morning breeze. The ship shudders almost imperceptibly before beginning to move. At first, the dock seems to slide away. Then the warehouses. Then the church steeple overlooking the harbor. Families standing along the waterfront become little more than dark shapes waving from the shore. Some crew members wave back. Others keep working without looking. Perhaps they have learned that goodbyes only become harder the longer you watch. The wind grows stronger. The harbor entrance falls behind. Ahead lies only open water. For the first time, there is nothing between you and the vast Atlantic Ocean except timber, canvas, iron, and the skill of the people around you. Your new home has begun to breathe with the rhythm of the sea, and before the day is over, the land itself will disappear. The excitement of leaving the harbor fades more quickly than you might expect. By the second morning, the shoreline is gone. In every direction, there is only water. The ocean stretches to the horizon without a single tree, hill, or church tower to remind you that land still exists somewhere beyond the curve of the earth. This floating world is now your home, and compared to the endless sea outside, it feels surprisingly small. A 19th century whaling ship was designed for endurance, not comfort. Every inch of space served a purpose. Nothing was wasted. The deck above is busy with ropes, masts, sails, and heavy equipment. Below deck, the ceilings are so low that many sailors must duck as they walk. The air is cool, damp, and filled with the familiar scent of oak planks, tar, lamp oil, and seawater that has soaked into the ship over countless voyages. At first, the smell seems overwhelming. After a few weeks, you barely notice it. Your sleeping place is little more than a narrow wooden bunk built directly into the ship's frame. It is shorter than many modern beds and only just wide enough for one person to turn over carefully during the night. A thin straw mattress softens the hard boards beneath you. A wool blanket provides warmth when the wind grows cold. There are no soft pillows, no spacious bedroom, no quiet corner where you can be alone. Above your head is another bunk. Beside you, another sailor sleeps only an arm's length away. Privacy is almost unknown aboard a whaling ship. Even at night, you are never truly alone. The walls creak softly as the vessel rises and falls with each passing swell. Every beam seems to have its own voice. Some groan. Others click quietly under pressure. The ropes above occasionally tighten with a dull snap before relaxing again. None of these sounds mean the ship is breaking apart. They are simply the language of a wooden vessel at sea. Before long, you begin to understand them without thinking. The greatest surprise is not the sound. It is the movement. The ship never stands still, not for a single moment. Even on calm days, the deck lifts gently beneath your feet before settling again. Your body constantly adjusts without asking your permission. Walking becomes a small exercise in balance. Pouring a cup of coffee requires steady hands. Climbing a ladder while carrying supplies becomes second nature. Sleeping is different too. The mattress shifts beneath you as the hull rolls from side to side. Sometimes the motion is so gentle that it almost feels like a cradle. Other nights, the sea reminds everyone aboard that comfort is only borrowed. A sudden wave can throw loose objects across the room. Lanterns sway from their hooks. Water splashes against the hull with enough force to shake the entire ship. Yet somehow, experienced sailors continue sleeping through it all. Their bodies have learned what newcomers still resist. Life here follows a rhythm older than any clock. Sunrise begins the day's work. Meals are simple and practical. Repairs never truly end. Ropes must be inspected, sails adjusted, wood scrubbed, equipment checked again and again. Salt, wind, and seawater wear down everything they touch. The ship survives only because every member of the crew helps keep it alive. You soon discover that the vessel itself feels almost alive. It breathes with the wind. It groans with the waves. It sighs when the sails fill. Every sound tells an experienced sailor something about the weather, the sea, or the condition of the ship. Long before weather forecasts existed, people learned to listen. As evening approaches, the light below deck grows dim. Oil lamps cast warm circles across the timber walls. Outside, the last colors of sunset disappear behind the endless horizon. Inside, men quietly prepare for another night. Some write a few lines in worn journals. Others mend clothing by lamplight. A few simply sit in silence, listening to the steady rhythm of water against the hull. Already, the world you left behind feels very far away, and tomorrow, the sea will ask you to learn another lesson. By your third day at sea, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Time no longer belongs to you. On land, the rising and setting of the sun shaped the rhythm of daily life. Church bells marked the hours. Markets opened in the morning and closed before dusk. Families gathered for meals at familiar times. Aboard a 19th century whaling ship, that comfortable rhythm disappears. The sea keeps no calendar. The ocean follows no schedule. Instead, your life is ruled by a single sound, the ship's bell. It hangs near the center of the vessel, polished smooth by years of salt air and countless hands. Its voice is neither loud nor musical. Yet every sailor aboard recognizes it instantly. Its steady ringing divides the endless voyage into watches, the rotating shifts that keep the ship moving every hour of every day. Unlike life ashore, the ship never truly sleeps. Someone must always remain awake. Someone must always watch the horizon. Someone must always be ready to adjust a sail, change course, or respond if the weather suddenly turns. While half the crew rests, the other half works. Then they change places again and again, day after day, week after week, for months without interruption. Your body does not welcome this arrangement. Just as you begin to fall into a deep sleep, the bell rings once more. Someone gently shakes your shoulder. It is your turn. The air outside is colder than you expected. The night sky stretches from one horizon to the other, brighter than almost anywhere on land. Without city lights, the stars seem countless. The Milky Way appears as a pale river flowing overhead. Even in darkness, the sea is never completely black. Moonlight paints silver paths across the slow, moving swells. Sometimes tiny flashes of blue, green light sparkle in the water beside the ship. These are living plankton, glowing softly whenever the waves disturb them. To sailors of the past, such sights could seem almost magical. Now begins your watch. You pace the deck slowly, careful not to slip on damp planks. The wheel turns steadily beneath the helmsman's hands. Far above, Sails shift gently with every change in the wind. The rigging hums softly, like the strings of an enormous instrument. Most of the time, nothing happens, and that is exactly how everyone hopes the night will pass. Hours drift by in quiet routine. You scan the horizon, you check the sails, you listen to the wind. Occasionally another sailor points toward distant clouds or notices a subtle change in the waves. Experienced eyes read the ocean almost like a book. A slight drop in temperature, a different smell in the air, the shape of clouds gathering far away. Each can be an early sign that the weather is changing. Eventually, the bell rings again. Your watch is over. Another crew takes your place without ceremony. There are no speeches, no applause, only the quiet understanding that every person aboard depends on everyone else doing their part. Below deck, the lamps burn low. You climb carefully into your narrow bunk. The ship rocks gently beneath you. Sleep comes quickly, but never for long. The bell will ring again, perhaps in 4 hours, perhaps sooner if the wind changes, or if someone high in the rigging suddenly calls out that they have spotted the towering spray of a whale on the distant horizon. On a whaling voyage, even dreams must wait their turn. Tonight, like every night that will follow, your rest belongs not to the clock, but to the sea. For several days, the sea has been almost gentle. The waves rise and fall with slow, steady rhythm. The wind fills the sails without complaint. Even the sky seems unusually kind. It is easy to believe that the ocean has accepted your presence. Experienced sailors know better. The sea rarely announces its moods. It simply changes. The first sign is almost impossible for a newcomer to notice. The wind grows strangely warm, then it turns cold again. Clouds begin gathering far beyond the horizon, where the sea and sky meet in a thin gray line. The sunlight slowly loses its brightness. The colors of the ocean become darker, deeper, almost made of steel instead of water. The captain does not raise his voice. He does not need to. A few quiet orders pass across the deck. Almost immediately, everyone begins moving. Loose equipment is secured. Extra ropes are coiled. Heavy barrels are checked once more. Some of the great sails are lowered before the wind has a chance to seize them. Preparation always begins before the storm arrives. Waiting until the rain starts would already be too late. The air grows still. For a few moments, everything feels unusually calm. Even the gulls that had followed the ship for days have disappeared. The silence itself feels different. Then the first strong gust strikes. The sails snap like enormous flags. The ship leans sharply to one side. The deck beneath your boots suddenly feels far steeper than before. Instinct tells you to grab the nearest rope. Around you, the crew hardly seem surprised. They widen their stance, lower their center of balance, and continue working with calm precision. Years at sea have taught them that panic wastes precious energy. Rain arrives almost sideways. The drops sting your face as the wind drives them across the deck. Within moments, every plank shines with water. The smell of salt fills the air. The sea is no longer something outside the ship. It is everywhere. The waves grow taller, one after another. They lift the bow high above the water before letting it fall into the next dark valley between the swells. The movement is unlike anything you have ever experienced on land. It is slow enough to feel every second, powerful enough to remind you how small this wooden vessel truly is. Below deck, life changes as well. Lanterns swing from iron hooks, casting long shadows across the timber walls. Chests are tied down with extra rope. Loose cups and tools are tucked safely away before they can slide across the floor. Even lying in your bunk becomes an exercise in balance. You quickly learn to brace one shoulder against the wooden wall, letting the motion of the ship carry you rather than resisting it. Fighting the movement only leaves you exhausted. Working with it makes the night easier. Hours pass. The storm reaches its greatest strength. Outside, the ocean disappears beneath sheets of rain and blowing spray. Inside, every beam groans under enormous pressure. The sound can seem frightening at first, yet these timbers have crossed oceans many times before. Each creak is not a warning of failure. It is the sound of the ship bending exactly as her builders intended. Wood, unlike stone, can move with the sea. That flexibility has saved countless lives. Sometime during the darkest hours of the night, the wind begins to weaken. The rain becomes lighter. The waves remain large, but their sharp edges slowly soften. One by one, the familiar sounds return, the steady creak of the rigging, the quiet splash of water against the hull, the low murmur of sailors speaking softly as they inspect the ship for damage. When dawn finally arrives, the clouds begin to break apart. Golden light slips through the eastern sky, touching the wet deck until it shines like polished oak. The storm has passed. The ocean, as if nothing had happened, settles into its endless rhythm once again, and you begin to understand one of the sea's oldest lessons. No storm lasts forever, but every sailor remembers the first one. After nearly 2 weeks at sea, another truth quietly settles into your daily life. The ocean changes every hour. Your meals almost never do. There are no bustling markets beyond the horizon. No fresh bread delivered each morning. No gardens, orchards, or nearby farms. Everything the crew will eat for months, sometimes years, was loaded aboard before the ship ever left the harbor. Every barrel matters, every sack of flour, every cask of fresh water. The ship carries not only its crew, but their future meals as well. The galley, the ship's small kitchen, is far smaller than you imagined. Tucked below the deck, it centers around a sturdy iron stove that must remain useful even while the ship rolls beneath it. Its metal rails and clever design help keep hot pots from sliding across the room when the sea grows rough. Even preparing a simple meal requires patience, balance, and experience. The cook rises long before dawn. By the time the first watch ends, the familiar scent of warm porridge or coffee drifts quietly through the passageways. No bell announces breakfast. The smell finds you first. Most mornings begin simply. Hardtack, baked so dry that it can last for years if kept dry, forms the foundation of many meals. The biscuits are so hard that sailors often soften them in coffee, soup or water before eating. Alongside them comes salted beef or pork, preserved with generous amounts of salt long before the voyage began. The meat is filling, though rarely tender. Dried beans, peas, oatmeal, rice, and occasional barrels of pickled vegetables help add variety whenever supplies allow. Fresh fruit is precious. Fresh vegetables disappear early in the voyage. Long before refrigeration, keeping food edible required careful planning and constant attention. Nothing can be wasted. The steward regularly checks the provisions. Barrels are inspected for leaks. Flour must remain dry. Water casks are watched carefully. Even a small problem can become serious after months at sea. Every sailor understands that the success of the voyage depends as much on careful storage as on favorable winds. Despite the simple menu, mealtimes become something everyone looks forward to. For a little while, work slows. Conversations grow louder. Stories from previous voyages pass around the table as easily as wooden bowls. One sailor describes towering waves near Cape Horn. Another remembers seeing icebergs farther north than he ever expected. Someone else quietly carves a small wooden figure while listening more than speaking. The food may be ordinary. The company gives it warmth. Tea and coffee offer small comforts against the endless salt air. Sometimes, when the weather is calm, the cook surprises the crew with something different. A pudding made from flour and molasses, a simple pie if ingredients allow, or fresh fish caught directly from the sea. These rare meals become memorable, not because they are extravagant, but because they briefly break the routine. Of course, not every day is so pleasant. When rough weather returns, cooking becomes far more difficult. Pots sway despite their iron restraints. Steam fills the tiny galley. Balancing a bowl while the ship rises and falls becomes almost as challenging as preparing the meal itself. Yet somehow, the cook manages. Day after day, month after month, like every other sailor aboard, he adapts to the rhythm of the sea. As evening approaches, supper is served before darkness settles across the ocean. The lamps glow softly. Wooden spoons scrape gently against bowls. Outside, waves whisper against the hull. Inside, tired voices grow quieter with every passing minute. There is comfort in this familiar ritual. The meal is simple. The surroundings are humble. But after another long day beneath open skies, a warm bowl held between cold hands feels like a small luxury. Tomorrow's breakfast will probably taste much the same, and strangely enough, you are beginning not to mind at all. For weeks, the voyage has settled into a quiet routine. The bell marks the watches. The wind fills the sails. Meals arrive at familiar hours. The horizon remains empty, day after day. Then, one ordinary morning, everything changes. It begins with a single voice high above the deck. The lookout, standing in the crow's nest nearly 30 meters above the sea, suddenly leans forward. His eyes fix on something far beyond the horizon. For a heartbeat, the ship remains silent. Then his shout echoes across the water. "There she blows." Every sailor aboard knows those words. Within seconds, the peaceful rhythm of the ship transforms into purposeful movement. Men leave their bunks. Conversations stop. Boots pound across the wooden deck. The captain reaches for a spyglass and climbs to the weather side of the ship. Far away, almost impossible to see at first, a thin white column rises above the ocean. It disappears, then another follows. A whale has surfaced to breathe. For the crew, this is the moment they have spent weeks hoping for. Whaling voyages could last months without a single successful sighting. Finding a whale was never guaranteed. It required patience, experience, favorable weather, and sometimes a great deal of luck. The ship does not rush forward immediately. Instead, everything happens with surprising care. The captain studies the wind. He watches the animal's movements. The sea itself becomes part of the calculation. Only when the moment seems right does he quietly give the next order. The whaleboats are lowered, light, narrow, and built for speed. Each boat is carefully eased into the water by ropes and pulleys. 6 men climb aboard. An experienced officer takes command. Each sailor already knows his place. There is very little shouting. There is no panic, only practiced routine. From the deck, you watch the boats glide across the calm water. Their oars rise and fall together with remarkable precision. No one wants unnecessary noise. The ocean is strangely peaceful. Gentle swells lift the boats almost silently toward the distant plume. Meanwhile, the great ship waits. Its sails flutter softly in the breeze. The crew remaining aboard watches with quiet concentration. Some repair ropes while they wait. Others stand along the rail, their eyes fixed on the distant boats that grow smaller with every passing minute. Time seems to slow. Minutes feel like hours. The sea gives away very little. Sometimes the whale disappears beneath the surface for what feels like an eternity. The boats drift quietly, waiting. Then, somewhere far ahead, another fountain of mist appears. The pursuit continues. Not every chase ends successfully. Many whales escape into deeper water. Changing winds, rough seas, or fading daylight often force the crews to return empty-handed. Such disappointments were accepted as part of life at sea. No one expected nature to follow human plans. By late afternoon, the boats finally begin rowing back toward the ship. The sailors are exhausted. Their faces show long hours beneath the open sun. Whether the day has brought success or disappointment, everyone aboard knows tomorrow may bring another opportunity or another week of empty horizons. As evening settles over the Atlantic, the sea once again grows quiet. The excitement fades. The familiar sounds return. The gentle creak of timber, the soft flutter of canvas, the steady whisper of waves brushing against the hull. You realize that life aboard a whaling ship is not built around moments of action. It is built around waiting for favorable winds, waiting for clear skies, waiting for the lookout's next call, waiting for the sea to decide whether it will offer anything at all. And beneath that endless sky, patience becomes as essential as food, fresh water, or the ship itself. After enough days at sea, something curious begins to happen. You stop asking how much farther there is to go. The question no longer makes sense. There is no road, no milestone, No distant mountains slowly growing larger on the horizon. There is only the ocean. Every morning, it greets you with a different face. Sometimes it is smooth as polished glass, reflecting clouds so perfectly that the ship seems to float between two skies. Other mornings, long rolling swells arrive from storms that passed hundreds of miles away, lifting the vessel gently for hours without a single cloud overhead. The sea is never truly still. Neither is the ship. By now, your body has almost forgotten what solid ground feels like. The constant motion that once seemed impossible has become almost comforting. When the waves are gentle, the slow rocking of the hull feels strangely familiar, like breathing. Some sailors even say they sleep better at sea than on land. Others discover the opposite. After returning home, they lie awake for nights because the bed beneath them refuses to move. Days begin blending together. Monday and Thursday lose their meaning. The calendar matters less than the weather. Instead of counting dates, the crew remembers events: the day the storm arrived, the week without wind, the morning dolphins raced alongside the bow, the night a brilliant green curtain of northern lights shimmered faintly above the horizon. Life becomes measured by moments rather than numbers. The sea also teaches patience. There are mornings when almost nothing happens. The sails remain full. The wind stays steady. Repairs are completed. The deck is scrubbed. Ropes are inspected once again. Then there is little left to do but wait. Some sailors mend torn clothing with careful stitches. Others carve small figures from scraps of wood. A few quietly write in journals, recording weather, distances, and small observations they hope to remember years later. Books are rare aboard ship. Conversation becomes the greatest entertainment. Older crew members tell stories of voyages to the Pacific, the Arctic, and waters so distant they seem almost imaginary. Some stories are certainly exaggerated. Others are so ordinary that they somehow feel more believable. Together, they help pass the endless hours. Nature occasionally provides its own quiet company. Schools of flying fish suddenly burst from the waves, gliding through the air before disappearing again beneath the surface. Pods of dolphins sometimes follow the bow for miles, weaving effortlessly through the water as though inviting the ship to play. Far overhead, wandering albatrosses circle on wings so broad they scarcely seem to move at all. Days may pass without another vessel appearing. Then, one afternoon, a tiny shape emerges on the horizon. Another ship. The excitement spreads quickly. Spyglasses appear. Flags are raised. Messages may be exchanged from a distance. News travels slowly across the oceans. A single meeting can bring word of weather, distant ports, or sightings far beyond the horizon. Within an hour, the stranger has become only another sail, fading into the endless blue. Silence returns. As the weeks pass, the world you left behind begins to feel almost dreamlike. Busy streets, church bells, horse-drawn wagons, markets filled with voices. They belong to another life now. Out here, the sounds are different. The steady whisper of wind through the rigging, the gentle splash of waves along the hull. the occasional cry of a seabird carried across miles of open water. At night, the darkness feels deeper than anything you have ever known. With no cities to brighten the horizon, the stars shine with astonishing clarity. The ocean reflects them in broken fragments, turning every passing wave into a moving mirror. Standing quietly on deck beneath that endless sky, it becomes easy to understand why so many sailors believed the sea possessed a spirit of its own, not because it spoke, but because it never stopped reminding you how small a single human life could be against the vastness of the world. And still, when morning comes, the ship turns its bow toward another empty horizon, carrying you onward into yet another day with no land in sight. By the time autumn gives way to winter, the air itself begins to change. At first, the difference is subtle. Each morning feels a little colder than the last. Your breath lingers in front of your face for a few moments before disappearing into the wind. The deck, once merely damp, now glistens with a thin layer of frost before sunrise. The farther north the ship sails, the quieter the ocean seems to become. The familiar cries of seabirds grow less frequent. Even the waves appear heavier, slower, as though the cold has reached into the water itself. The crew begins dressing differently. Thick woolen sweaters are pulled over linen shirts. Heavy pea coats button tightly against the wind. Scarves are wrapped high around faces until only tired eyes remain visible. Wool caps replace lighter hats, and sturdy leather boots are lined with extra socks whenever possible. No one speaks much about the cold. There is little point. Everyone feels it. The wind always finds a way through tiny openings in your clothing. It slips beneath collars. It creeps through damp gloves. It settles into your fingers until even tying a simple knot requires careful concentration. Simple tasks take longer now. A rope stiffened by frost no longer bends as easily. Wooden blocks become slippery with ice. Every step across the deck demands attention. One careless movement can send a sailor sliding across frozen planks. Before dawn, several crew members walk the length of the ship, carrying wooden buckets filled with coarse sand. They scatter it across the icy deck to improve footing. It is a simple solution, but one that has prevented countless falls over the centuries. The sea itself begins offering new sights. Small pieces of drifting ice appear first. They float silently past the hull like scattered fragments of broken glass. A few days later come larger floes, thick enough for seabirds to rest upon as the ship passes. Everyone watches them carefully. The captain orders frequent soundings and constant attention to the water ahead. Unlike waves, ice does not move aside. On especially clear mornings, the lookout spots towering white shapes far in the distance. Icebergs. Some rise only a few meters above the sea. Others resemble floating cliffs, glowing pale blue beneath the winter sun. Their true size remains hidden below the surface. Experienced sailors know to give them generous distance. What can be seen is only a small part of what lies beneath. The nights become longer. Darkness arrives early and lingers late into the morning. Oil lamps burn for more hours than before. filling the cabins with warm amber light. Crew members gather close together whenever work allows, not simply for conversation, for warmth. A steaming mug of coffee now feels less like a drink and more like comfort itself. The galley stove becomes one of the most welcome places aboard. Even standing beside it for a few quiet minutes offers relief from the relentless wind outside. Yet the cold brings beauty as well. One evening, shortly after sunset, someone quietly points toward the northern sky. At first you notice nothing. Then a faint ribbon of pale green appears above the horizon. Slowly it begins to move. The light stretches across the heavens, folding and unfolding like silk, carried by an invisible breeze. More colors emerge, soft white, delicate green, hints of violet. The entire crew falls silent. No orders are given. No work stops. But for a few precious moments, everyone simply watches. There is no need for words. The sea below reflects the shifting colors, turning the dark water into a mirror of the sky. The ship drifts onward beneath the silent display, its sails barely stirring in the cold night air. You pull your coat tighter around your shoulders and take one last look before returning below deck. Outside, winter has claimed the ocean. Inside, the familiar creaking of timber and the gentle sway of the ship remind you that, despite the ice and endless cold, this weathered wooden vessel is still carrying you safely through one of the most remote places on Earth. Tomorrow, the voyage will continue deeper into the northern seas, where the silence grows even greater than the cold itself. Not every night at sea is filled with roaring wind and towering waves. Some become so peaceful that they remain in a sailor's memory for the rest of his life. Tonight is one of them. The sea has finally grown quiet. The swell still lifts the ship, but only gently, like the slow breathing of some enormous sleeping creature beneath the surface. The sails hang full in a steady breeze. There is no need for hurried commands, no ropes snapping in the wind, no rain against the deck, only silence. After supper, the last traces of daylight slowly fade into the western horizon. The sky changes from gold to soft violet, then deep blue. Finally, darkness settles across the ocean. It is a darkness unlike any found on land. There are no villages glowing in the distance, no lighthouse sweeping the horizon, no streets lined with lanterns, only the ship and the stars. One by one, they appear overhead until the entire sky seems covered in light. Thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, without the glow of modern cities. The heavens reveal details that many people today never have the chance to see. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a pale river of silver dust. It seems bright enough to cast a faint shadow across the deck. For centuries, sailors depended on these stars. Long before satellites or electronic navigation, the night sky served as one of the most reliable maps ever created. The North Star held a special place among them. Unlike the others, it appeared almost motionless, helping navigators determine their direction across the vast ocean. The officers step quietly across the deck, occasionally checking the sky with practiced eyes. Simple instruments help confirm the ship's position. But even without them, experience tells them much. The stars have become old companions. You lean against the wooden rail. The cool night air carries the scent of salt and fresh wind. Somewhere below, waves brush gently against the hull with a soft, rhythmic whisper. The sound never quite repeats itself. Every wave is different, yet together they form a quiet melody that seems to belong only to the sea. Far ahead, tiny flashes of blue, green light shimmer beneath the surface as the bow cuts through the water. Glowing plankton briefly illuminates the dark waves before fading again into blackness. It is as though the ocean itself has gathered a handful of stars and hidden them beneath its surface. A sailor nearby notices them and smiles. Even after years at sea, such moments never lose their wonder. The crew speaks little tonight. Some sit together near the mainmast, quietly repairing worn clothing by the light of a single lantern. Others simply watch the horizon in comfortable silence. No one feels the need to fill every moment with conversation. Out here, silence is not emptiness. It is part of the journey. From somewhere above comes the gentle creak of the mast. The rigging hums softly whenever the breeze freshens. The rudder leaves a faint trail through the calm water behind the ship. Everything moves, nothing rushes. Hours pass almost unnoticed. The watch changes quietly. One group disappears below deck while another takes its place. The ship continues forward without pause, crossing invisible miles through the sleeping ocean. You remain on deck a little longer than necessary. There is something strangely comforting about standing beneath a sky so immense. The worries you carried from shore seem impossibly small now. Even the voyage itself feels tiny compared with the age of the stars above. Eventually, the cool air reminds you that it is time to rest. You climb carefully below deck, where the familiar warmth of timber and lamplight welcomes you once again. As you settle into your narrow bunk, the gentle rocking of the ship feels almost like a cradle. Outside, the stars continue their silent journey across the heavens. Inside, the crew sleeps in quiet rhythm with the sea, while the wailing ship carries everyone onward through another peaceful night beneath an endless sky. By now, many months have passed since the day you left the harbor. The excitement of departure has long faded. The routines of shipboard life have become second nature. You know which plank creaks beneath your feet. You recognize the voice of the wind before it reaches the sails. You can tell the strength of the swell simply by the way your bunk moves beneath you. The sea has become familiar, but it never becomes easy. Living aboard a 19th century whaling ship demanded far more than strength. It demanded endurance. The work was relentless. There were sails to repair after every storm, rigging to inspect, decks to scrub, barrels to secure, tools to sharpen. Nothing aboard could simply be ignored. Salt settled on every surface. Moisture found its way into every crack. Wood swelled and shrank with changing weather. If the crew stopped caring for the ship would eventually stop caring for them. The human body faced its own challenges. Small cuts healed slowly in the damp sea air. Hands became rough from hauling rope day after day. Shoulders ached from lifting heavy supplies. Even the simplest movements could leave bruises after months of rolling seas. The ship's surgeon did what he could with the knowledge and medicines available at the time. His tiny cabin held carefully arranged bottles, bandages, needles, and surgical tools. Compared with modern medicine, there was very little he could offer. Cleanliness, rest whenever possible, and good fortune often mattered just as much as any treatment. Fresh food had become a distant memory. Despite careful planning, fruits and many vegetables disappeared early in the voyage. Sailors knew that long journeys sometimes brought swollen gums, aching joints, and overwhelming fatigue. Symptoms we now recognize as scurvy caused by a lack of vitamin C. By the 19th century, many navies had already learned that citrus fruits could help prevent the disease. Whaling voyages, however, often spent many months far from ports where fresh supplies could be obtained. Whenever the opportunity arose, captains eagerly purchased fresh produce before continuing the voyage. Illness was not the only challenge. The mind also carried its own burdens. Imagine seeing nothing but water for months, the same deck, the same faces, the same horizon, day after day. Letters from home could not follow you. News traveled only as fast as another ship happened to cross your path. Some sailors quietly counted the weeks until they hoped to return. Others stopped counting altogether. Yet friendships formed in these difficult conditions often lasted a lifetime. Trust became one of the ship's most valuable supplies. Every sailor depended upon everyone else. When climbing high into the rigging during rough weather, your safety rested in the hands of those securing the lines below. When rowing a whaleboat far from the ship, every oar had to move together. One careless mistake could place the entire crew at risk. The ocean rewarded cooperation far more often than courage alone. As another evening settles over the Atlantic, the work finally slows. The deck is quieter now. A few sailors sit together, mending jackets worn thin by months of wind and salt. One quietly plays a simple tune on a small fiddle. Another carves the date into the handle of a wooden spoon, marking yet another month spent at sea. No one speaks loudly. There is no need. Everyone is tired. But there is also quiet satisfaction. The ship is still afloat. The crew is still together. Tomorrow will bring another sunrise over open water, another watch, another meal, another day carried forward by wind, wood, and determination. Life aboard a whaling ship was never defined by a single dramatic moment. It was shaped by hundreds of ordinary days, each one demanding patience, discipline, and resilience. And perhaps that was the greatest challenge of all, not surviving one terrible storm, but finding the strength to meet the sea again every single morning. One morning, almost without warning, the captain gathers the crew. There is no excitement in his voice, only quiet certainty. The voyage is coming to an end. For many months, the ship has followed whales across distant oceans, sailing farther from home than most people of the 19th century could ever imagine. Now, The bow finally turns toward familiar waters. Home is still thousands of miles away, but for the first time in a very long while, every mile sailed brings you closer instead of farther. The crew settles into a different rhythm. There is still work to be done. There are always sails to mend, ropes to inspect, and decks to scrub. A wooden ship is never truly finished asking for attention. Yet something has changed. The conversations sound lighter. Smiles appear a little more often. Someone wonders whether the old bakery near the harbor is still open. Another sailor talks about the child who was only an infant when the voyage began and may now be running through the streets. Time has continued on land, even while life at sea seemed frozen in its endless routine. The weather slowly grows milder. The bitter northern winds become less frequent. Heavy wool coats are folded away whenever the afternoon sun grows warm enough. The smell of the sea changes too. Experienced sailors notice it before anyone else. The air carries a faint scent of earth, of plants, of distant forests carried far across the water. Land may still be invisible, but nature quietly announces that it is drawing near. Seabirds begin appearing more often. At first, only one or two circle above the mast before disappearing again. A few days later, entire flocks pass overhead. Unlike the great ocean birds that spend months far from shore, these visitors rarely travel far from land. Their arrival fills the crew with quiet hope. Even the ocean changes its character. The deep rolling swells of the open Atlantic gradually become shorter and gentler. Fishing boats occasionally appear on the horizon. Merchant ships become more common. After months of solitude, it feels almost strange to share the sea with strangers again. One evening, just before sunset, the lookout calls down, not with the excitement of spotting a whale, but with something even more welcome. Land ahead. Every conversation stops. The crew gathers along the rail. Far away, barely visible through the evening haze, a thin dark line stretches across the horizon. No mountains, no towering cliffs, just land simple, silent, beautiful. For a long time, nobody says a word. Each sailor watches in quiet reflection. Some remember the morning they first sailed away from this same coastline. Others think of families waiting at home, perhaps wondering whether this ship would ever return. The shoreline grows clearer with every passing hour. Fields begin replacing endless water. Church towers rise above distant villages. Lighthouses flash steadily through the coming darkness. How different they seem now. Months ago, they marked the edge of adventure. Today, they feel like old friends welcoming travelers home. The ship enters familiar coastal waters just after sunrise. The wind is gentle. The harbor lies ahead. Small boats move busily across the calm water. Their crews probably have no idea how many thousands of miles this weathered vessel has traveled. The great sails are slowly lowered one final time. Anchors are prepared. Ropes are coiled with practiced hands. The voyage is almost complete. You stand quietly at the rail, watching the harbor grow larger. It looks smaller than you remembered. Or perhaps you have simply changed. The sea has a way of doing that. It teaches patience. humility, endurance. It reminds every sailor that the world is far larger than any single town, any single country, or even any single ocean. Soon your boots will once again touch solid ground. Yet part of you already knows that the steady rhythm of the waves, the whisper of wind through the rigging, and the endless horizon will remain with you long after the voyage has become a memory. The first footsteps onto solid ground feel surprisingly uncertain. For more than a year, the deck beneath your feet has never stopped moving. Now the earth is perfectly still, and somehow that stillness feels unfamiliar. Many sailors instinctively widen their stance, almost expecting the harbor itself to rise and fall beneath them. Some even describe a strange sensation that lingers for days, as though the sea continues to rock them long after the voyage has ended. Your legs must quietly remember how to walk on land again. The harbor is alive with sound. Wagons rattle over cobblestones. Blacksmiths strike glowing iron. Merchants call to waiting customers. Children laugh as they run along the waterfront. Dogs bark somewhere beyond the warehouses. After so many months, surrounded only by wind and waves, the noise feels almost overwhelming. The familiar smell of salt still hangs in the air, but now it mixes with fresh bread from nearby bakeries, smoke from household chimneys, damp earth after rain, and flowers growing in small gardens beyond the docks. It is a reminder that the world has continued living while you were far beyond the horizon. Families slowly gather along the pier. Some recognize loved ones immediately. Others hesitate for a moment. Time changes every face. Children who once waved goodbye have grown taller. Parents have more gray in their hair. Friends embrace quietly, grateful that another voyage has ended safely. Not every ship returns with every member of its crew. Those reunions are treasured all the more because everyone understands how uncertain long ocean voyages could be. The captain remains aboard until every duty has been completed. Logbooks are carefully closed. Charts are rolled and stored away. The sails that carried the ship across thousands of miles of open ocean are folded for the last time. Even now, the work is not quite finished. A ship, much like the sea itself, is always asking for one more task. As the day passes, the crew gradually disperses into the streets of the harbor town. Some head directly toward their homes. Others stop first at familiar inns, eager for a hot meal, a soft bed, and conversations that do not pause every few minutes for the changing wind. Simple comforts suddenly feel extraordinary. A chair that does not move, a window that stays perfectly still, a room where silence is not broken by creaking timber or waves brushing against the hull. Yet something unexpected happens that evening. As you lie down to sleep, the bed feels strangely wrong. It does not sway. It does not rise gently beneath you. There is no distant whisper of water against wooden planks, no soft hum of wind through the rigging. The silence is almost too complete. Many sailors experienced this after long voyages. Some found themselves waking during the night, convinced they had missed the watch bell. Others missed the steady rhythm of the sea more than they had ever imagined possible. The ocean leaves its mark in quiet ways, not only upon weathered hands or sun-darkened faces. It changes how a person sees distance, time, patience, and home itself. You begin the voyage believing that survival depends upon strength. The sea teaches something different. It rewards preparation over pride, steady work over hurried effort, calm minds over loud voices. Every sunrise earned at sea is the result of countless small decisions made well by ordinary people working together. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson carried home from a 19th century whaling voyage. Not the storms, not the whales, not even the endless horizon, but the understanding that human beings have always been capable of adapting to places that seem impossible at first. The harbor where your journey began now lies peacefully behind you. The ship rests quietly at her berth, her weathered hull reflecting in the calm evening water. Tomorrow, workers will begin preparing her for another voyage. New sailors will arrive carrying small sea chests and tightly rolled blankets filled with the same mixture of excitement and uncertainty you once felt. The cycle will begin again, just as it has for generations. As for you, tonight there is nothing left to do. The sea has finally released its hold. You close your eyes. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's bell rings softly across the harbor. For a brief moment, it almost sounds like another watch beginning, but this time there is nowhere you need to go. You are home. And with that quiet thought, our journey comes to its end. Thank you for sailing through history with me. May your night be calm, your dreams be peaceful, and your own horizon always lead you safely home.